Welcome back to the Question Your Induction mini challenge. And if you are brand new to me and you just stumbled upon this video, then you may want to go and check out the other two that I already dropped. Go into the playlist on my YouTube channel and check out the Question Your Induction mini challenge because I went into the overview of the 3 books that I'm going to be referencing. I told you a little bit about my story and why this challenge is so important. I also want to make sure that you are treating this challenge as if you had paid $247 to go through it as a full-on course. Because during this challenge, I'm going to also be referencing other things that you're going to want to check out if you want the deeper dive. My aim is to help you question your induction because we are in induction season. This is the time of year that induction is pushed on moms, and the other one is in the summertime, close to summer holidays. So what happens is then we have a lot of C-sections that happen, and we have a lot of traumatic births. And when you are planning a natural birth, the last thing you need is to start worrying about induction. But unfortunately, we have a very induction-happy culture. And because of that, there's several layers of fear that you have to go through. I will be talking about that later into this challenge. But first, what I'm going to recap is what we already learned is that you have the right to informed consent and refusal. Sometimes, though, if you're declining induction and the medical system has a vested interest and there's category 5 care providers out there, go and check out my birth advocacy report or the videos where I've talked about category 5 care providers, the 5 levels of resistance. Category 5s do not like to be challenged on their authority, and they are more likely to call CPS on you, Child Protective Services, whatever they call that in your country. So the thing is that they can't actually call CPS on you, and CPS really hates it. They don't really want to deal with these doctors who just want to push them through the system to try and say, hey, this person is negligent because they're not doing the induction and I recommended it. There's also a cultural aspect of this. How ingrained in your culture is it to just listen to the doctor? But I'm really helping you to become the birth consumer because we can shift the tides and it takes all of us to do it. And the more that this information is out there, the more likely it is that some mom is going to come across it when she's looking to avoid an induction in the future. So all I ask is that you pay it forward, pass this on to other moms, get this out there, because a drop in the ocean creates ripples. Many ripples create waves, and enough waves can change the tide. Here at Empowering Moms, I'm all about changing the tide. And also, we aim for a true natural birth and we pull back only as much as needed. Now, I'm not saying that induction is inherently bad and wrong. Sometimes it is very useful because there are complications that can come up. And that is what this part of the challenge is all about, is assessing complications, deviations, and variations. Now, this was taken from Rachel Reed, where she had a decision-making framework, and she had 2 chapters. And she broke it up in her book, Why Induction Matters. The first chapter that I'm referencing is complications. So she had a lot of complications in there. But within there was also something that I noticed that was more like a deviation because it wasn't a true emergency. It was either they could induce or they didn't need to induce. Preeclampsia, you don't want to mess around with. However, chronic high blood pressure, that has a little bit more leeway. However, in the book, Rachel Reed had that in complications. And I myself have coached my dear best friend, Jenny, who had chronic high blood pressure and did not induce the second time that she got pregnant and went on to have an unassisted hospital VBAC after having had the traumatic birth beforehand. If you want to know more about that story, you can always go and check out the positive birth stories in the playlist, or you can read my book, Your Empowered Birth. I do talk about Jenny's story a lot. Jenny has also written a blog post on her website, Empress Birthworks, that talks about the induction process. So I would suggest you go and check that out. She is also the creator of the birth plan template, which, if you have gone through the Write Your Empowered Birth Plan mini challenge, you may already be familiar about this fill in the blank template that she found to be easy and effortless because Jenny is a designer first, and she knew how to get her message across. So she took everything that I taught her in creating the birth vision, and then she was able to draw her hard lines in the sand and then create this beautiful template that then became her birth plan that she gave to the doctors and the nurses, and they were able to just follow what Jenny wanted, not what Jenny didn't want. And she had her pink lines of when she might want something brought up. So it's a very beautiful and very helpful birth plan. It follows the empowered birth method, so it's easy to implement because I've already given you the map on how to do it. And then in addition to that, now you have the template to fill out. So again, Jenny was really inspired by what I was teaching her when we were going through our live classes together. And she's like, Carly, how do I take your classes when I was just sharing just as a friend? And we basically co-created Your Empowered Birth Academy and Your Empowered Birth Workshop together. So understanding the backstory of empowering moms, I had already told her about this book, Why Induction Matters. And I had also told her to go and get herself a copy. And then in the end, I ended up just buying it for her birthday. And she went through it with a fine-tooth comb. And then she wrote out a post on induction that you will want to check out as well. So Rachel Reed, as I mentioned, she talks about complications, but there's also variations. And variations of pregnancy are things like going past 42 weeks, going past 41 weeks, having twins, having had previous C-section, having a big baby. Those are things that are a variation of normal. So the difference between a complication, a variation, and a deviation is essentially this. And if you want to know more, I would suggest you go and check out my Essential Tips series and Deep Dive Masterclasses, where I go into assessing risk. So I did a whole birth advocacy segment of Essential Tips. I've also got a report that comes with Your Empowered Birth Toolkit and the book Your Empowered Birth in the bonuses. That also helps you with the 5-step decision-making framework to making empowered decisions. And I go deeper into the complications and variations. So the way to look at a complication is, wow, this is really a problem. We need to act fast, such as HELP syndrome, such as cholestasis, such as preeclampsia. Those are emergency situations. Those are the ones where we're like, we really do need to induce. We need to have this baby out sooner rather than later because of this complication that is happening where mom's health is at risk and baby's health is at risk. Now, this is where I deviate from Rachel Reed and created deviations because she put complications and deviations in one chapter of her book. And if you want to know what different complications and deviations are in the book, you can go and get her book, Why Induction Matters. There is a list of them. I also did a video way back. I will probably do another one in the future. But if you do reach out to me and ask me about it, I did read from the book. It was very unpolished, though. This was back when I was a birth advocate for improving birth. So it is what it is, but it has good information if you would prefer to listen to it. But I do suggest you getting a copy because it breaks down the numbers and it's helpful to have this book in your possession. It's easy to read. And it also goes into experiences of induction and experiences of declining induction, experiences of the complications, and how moms came to their decisions. This is a very well-written book. I'm really impressed with the level of care that Rachel Reed put into this book, and that is why I recommend it to all of my clients. So you're in good hands if you go and get a copy. But with a deviation, this is different than a complication. This is, wow, I have certain factors like chronic high blood pressure, type 1 diabetes, gestational diabetes that could lead to me having a true complication, possibly. Induction is on the table as an option that I could choose, but I can weigh the pros and cons, and I don't need to act now. I don't need to make a decision right away. I can take my time. There are women who have followed the empowered birth method who have chosen induction, and there are women who have followed the empowered birth method who have not had an induction with certain complications. There's the type 1 diabetes, which I have an interview with Claire Sherman. She chose not to induce, and she had a home birth after a previous C-section with type 1 diabetes. There is Jenny, who also chose not to induce, even though she had chronic high blood pressure and gestational diabetes and a previous history of postpartum preeclampsia with her first baby. But she also was able to break down the numbers. And she's like, I'm not concerned unless my blood pressure gets up to this height. If it's not at that number, I'm not going to worry about it. So with a deviation, this is when you want to learn more about your individual condition. This is when you're going to want to do additional research outside of just what Empowering Moms offers. And I do have additional references for you if you reach out, hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com. I can direct you where you need to go. If I don't have it in my possession, there is probably a birth worker out there who you could learn from and they could find it. It's going to take all of us working together. I believe that information needs to be freely accessible. When it's not, we're stuck in fear. More on that later. Finally, we have the variations. That is breech birth. That is twins. That is triplets. That is having a previous C-section. That is going past 41 weeks or even 42 weeks. That is having a big baby. That's having a small baby. There's a difference between small for gestational age versus intrauterine growth restriction. And while Rachel Reed puts that inside of complications and not in variations, for obvious reasons, she was talking about intrauterine growth restriction. A small baby on its own is not a complication. I had been told that my baby was small for dates, and it turns out that that baby was almost 8 pounds when he was born. So how small could he have really been? But there was that concern, and I didn't know enough about intrauterine growth restriction versus small for gestational age. Rachel Reed breaks that down inside of why induction matters, which is, again, why I love this book so much and why I would suggest you get a copy. So now that you understand the difference between complications, deviations, and variations, you're going to start thinking about this, okay? You already know your rights and you know what the environment is like. If you did the homework, you now know how likely it is that they're going to try to call CPS on you or put pressure on you and otherwise make you forget that you have the right to informed consent and refusal, regardless of actual laws on the book. Because first of all, how are they really going to know that you're going into labor? You can just like disappear and not go in. You can continue to say no. But how volatile is that fight going to be? Because if it's going to be a fight, then you need to kind of pivot your plan a little bit. Not saying yes to the induction if you don't want it, but at the same time, knowing how to play the game. And that is really what the empowered birth method aims to do. This is what I help my clients with. So usually I take those complex cases where my client has the odds stacked against them. I have had clients before who were kind of concerned because they lived in a country where there were very strong personhood laws, and I was aware of that. And they did have people that they were sent to the house to check on them, and they didn't open the door. But understanding how we have to play things differently depending on our environment and what we're really dealing with. You cannot thrive with Category 5 care providers. Unfortunately, the medical system kind of attracts those kinds of people, and then they are the ones that usually climb to the top of the hierarchy. So you really do need to know what's going on in your area. I happen to live in an area where everybody's very induction happy and risk averse. And because of that, a lot of moms get pushed into induction that otherwise didn't need it. So Jenny was now aware of this extra layer, which is why she was like, Carly, how do I take your classes? How do I work with you directly? How do I pay you all of the money to learn what you know? Because this needs to be out there. So I'm putting it out there, and I've put it out there in multiple different formats. And it's inside of Your Empowered Birth. It's inside Your Empowered Birth Workshop. It's deeper inside of Your Empowered Birth Academy, which I'll tell you more about later. And it's inside of all of my deep dive master classes. You can piece it together. The fastest track is always to email me, hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com. I am here to support you. Every birth can and should be a beautiful and empowering experience. You deserve to know whether you actually have a real complication or if this is something that, hey, maybe I already have somebody who has had an empowered birth and can tell you what they did so that they avoided the induction, or they had a more positive experience with induction because of the way that they took certain steps in addition to what was being recommended. So it's always your choice. That's the message I really want you to have, is that it's always your choice. And you need to come to this from a place of power, not a place of fear. We will get into that later. But first, I want you to go back and I want you to think about the possible variations and possible deviations that you may already have. Obviously, you wouldn't have a complication right away unless you're being booked for an induction next week. If you're being booked for an induction next week, though, it may actually just be a deviation. It may not be a true complication. I always looked at induction when it was being offered to me as if they were truly concerned about my baby's growth, I would have already had him. But they are still stringing me along. I'm still going for these non-stress tests every week. I'm still doing these ultrasounds every 2 weeks. And they keep trying to tell me that something might possibly maybe happen, but nothing's happening. So I'm not going to book that induction. So I was able to go until 41 weeks, and I went into labor at 40 plus 6. And I had my baby at 41 weeks, and he was almost 8 pounds. In contrast, Christine had been told, you're 42 weeks, that's the cutoff, midwife won't be able to see you anymore. But the fact is that she actually could have, she just didn't want to get in trouble. That's a whole other issue, which is why I have the birth advocacy report and why it's important to be the birth consumer, because this is how we're able to turn things around. If we keep playing the games that the hospital keeps making us play, then yeah, nothing's going to change. But those midwives actually could help us. We actually could go longer in our pregnancies. It's just that there's a fear of litigation, and there's profit and convenience and liability. That's really what they're operating on. Dawn Thompson herself of Birthify has also said this. She said this when she was running Improving Birth, and she says it now with Birthify. This is an ongoing issue. And I am committed to every mom having an empowered birth, making empowered decisions, making decisions from a place of power, not a place of fear. So that's essentially what you need to do, is figure out, do you have a complication, variation, deviations if you're not currently pregnant or you're not far enough in your pregnancy, thinking about what you might want to do in certain cases. Definitely pick up a copy of Why Induction Matters by Rachel Reed. Another really good one that I would suggest is Labor Induction, Why, When, and How by Hensi Goer. And if you also want to go for a more clinical view, In Your Own Time by Dr. Sarah Wickham has even more information, more breakdowns of the numbers. There are many other references on induction. I have so many in my collection. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com, and either myself or one of my team members will get back to you within 3 to 5 business days. So that's what I have for you. If you found value in this, please like, share, subscribe, pay it forward, pass this on to other moms. And if you have any questions, you know what to do. Just hit reply to any one of the emails if you're on the newsletter, or email hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com, and we'll get back to you within 3 to 5 business days if you're not a subscriber, and 1 to 2 if you are. Essentially, I'm also going to leave you with this because it is one of our resources inside of our Empowered Birth Toolkit. You can go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/toolkit, and you can go and subscribe to the newsletter. In addition, inside of the Empowered Birth Toolkit in Empowered Birth Wisdom, there is the resource that tells you the 5-step decision-making framework for the Empowered Birth method, including a deeper dive on complications, variations, and deviations. In addition to that, I also have a workbook that helps you make empowered decisions about what you want to do in terms of intervention. You can use that for induction. So that workbook you can fill it out through Adobe Reader and or any other PDF editor. And essentially, you can also print it out if you prefer pen and paper, whatever your method, that will help you to make those empowered decisions. It's almost as good as me coaching you directly. Because Path 3 premium coaching, I don't work with everyone who comes to me, and I prioritize self-study VIP subscribers who have already paid for my deeper level programs to get on to the time slots on my calendar, because they are the ones that already paid for it. So they get access first. They always get priority access. So there may not be any additional slots available for you to have a laser session with me. And if that's the case, then you can't get on with the coaching queens either, because they are taking on clients from our self-study VIP program or from our deeper level of premium coaching. Then it may be a wait list, okay? So that is why I always suggest that you go with self-study VIP if you do need to have that extra layer of support. And I will be telling you more about that on day 5, okay? So yeah, you just go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/toolkit, put your name and email in. That will get you the access to those 2 resources, the decision-making framework and the Making an Empowered Decision workbook, okay? So that's what I have for you right now. And the next topic that we're going to be covering is a inversion of brain, which is also available deeper inside your Empowered Birth Workshop. I call this NABRI, okay? And that is the psychological way to get past your fear and also recognize, wait a minute, I don't need to assess the risks at all in this case because I can just do nothing. And that is a perfectly valid option. You can choose to do nothing, because there are times where your care provider will offer induction, especially if they are risk averse. And you can be like, yeah, that's cute. No, I'm not going to induce for that, such as big baby or small baby. After I learned about the fact that I just measure small at the end of my pregnancy and it doesn't have anything to do with my baby being big or small, when I was told the second time, I was like, yeah, that's cute. I won't be inducing. But it was kind of a wink, nudge, nudge with my midwife, because she already knew and because we were already on board with everything, because I used the Empowered Birth method with my second pregnancy. So that's coming up next. And again, if you found value, like, share, subscribe, pay it forward, pass this on, and have a happy Empowered Birth journey. And I will see you in the next video. Namaste.